Good morning. I'm Michelle Kaplan, an Executive Vice President at Weitzman. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning at the historic Bush Institute. We are recognizing some history of our own today, as this is the 27th time we've held this annual forecast event. This facility celebrates history while looking forward. In our own way, we also look forward. This is the first anniversary of our new brand, Weitzman. You know that change is good when your people and the community not only accept your new brand, but embrace it. The retail industry is also looking forward. We see 2018 as the year when our major retailers complete the merger of physical and digital retailing. The strong holiday season proves that. Today, we'll start our program with an insightful conversation between our Executive Chairman, Herb Weitzman, and Robert Kaplan, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Rob promises to give us insight into our markets, our economy, and our outlook for 2018. We'll end today's program with Bob Young, Executive Managing Director. Bob will cover the highlights of our annual retail survey and forecast. I want to recognize our many professionals who work tirelessly to make today's program possible. Our forecast and market reports represent what we are all about: client service, market knowledge, community, and giving back. Thank you to our many clients and customers for their business. I also want to extend a very special thanks to JP Morgan. We've worked with them in many capacities for many years, so their sponsorship of this event is especially meaningful to us. Thank you again for joining us today. I'd like to now welcome Herb Weitzman and Rob Kaplan.
Thank you, Rob.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
We got a lot of great people here from all walks of commercial real estate. And for Rob, as Michelle said, is President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. This is the 11th district. And Rob also he currently serves on the Federal Open Market Committee. This committee formulates monetary policy for the United States. This is big. And as it relates to our careers and our vocations, Rob has been, he's an author. He's written several great books in real estate. Spent 23 years with Goldman Sachs and was left there as the vice chairman. He has also spent 10 years before Goldman. He was a senior associate dean at Harvard Business School and has been a professor there. So we're just happy to have Rob here in Dallas with us. I think Rob is now a citizen of Dallas. We're making you an honorary citizen today.
I'm a real citizen,
Rob,
shockingly.
He's fit into Dallas, and he's from Prairie Village, Kansas. Now, Prairie Village, you know, I think he was meant to be here in Texas, don't you think? So we're going to get on with some major questions that you're here to, Rob's going to answer and you're interested in hearing about. And Rob, I think what we'll do, let you talk about the national economy here right now.
All right, and I'll talk about the national economy. I'll also talk about what's going on outside the U.S. and then here in Texas. So we grew last year in the United States. GDP growth was 2.5%. Our forecast right now at the Dallas Fed is that we're going to grow about 2.5% again this year. My guess is if that forecast is wrong, it's going to turn out to be low. And why do I say that? One of the key underpinnings of the U.S. economy is the consumer. Consumer is about 70% of the U.S. economy. And the reality is consumer balance sheets are in very good shape. Consumers spent the last 8 or 9 years basically deleveraging since the crisis. It's not that they've reduced debt so much, but they haven't really net grown debt very much, and incomes have grown into it. So household balance sheets are in good shape, and household debt service compared to GDP is in historically good shape. and you got a very strong job market. And I think you're going to see a little bit more wage pressure this year. So all those things further strengthen the consumer. And so I think that provides an excellent underpinning. In addition, business investment was a little better last year, and I'm pretty confident it's going to be better this year, spurred to some extent by the tax legislation. It's not as significant as consumer spending, but it's a big bolstering to the economy. And then the last thing you got going on is global growth. Growth outside the United States is better than expected, and that provides a good tailwind for the U.S., in particular for net exports, but it provides a tailwind generally. So we're going to have a pretty good year in 2018. There's some warning signs on the horizon, which we'll talk about in a little bit, demographic changes, other headwinds, but 2018 should be a strong year. For Texas, interesting, job growth last year was 2.5%. Our latest forecast is job growth in Texas is going to be 3% this year. That is the highest rate of job growth we've had in several years. What's more significant, the unemployment rate right now in the state of Texas is approximately 3.8%. That is the lowest recorded rate of unemployment, believe it or not, since the 70s in this state. And the other thing going on in Texas is migration. So one of the things I'm worried about in the United States is aging population and slowing workforce growth because of aging. And if you look at the country, there's 35, 40 states where the population looks to be basically flat to maybe down. That's a big challenge. Texas is not one of those states. Texas is growing population. We are a magnet and have been and will continue to be, based on everything I say, for people and firms that are moving to this state. And so we're growing population, and that's an enormous tailwind for the state of Texas. The other thing that's a big tailwind, obviously in 2014 and 15 and parts of 16, the decline in energy, that was a headwind. We're now to the point where, because of prices rebounding and firming, we had good CapEx and good drilling growth last year, and we expect we're going to have good drilling growth this year. The bulk of the growth in drilling in the United States, I think something like 75% of it last year, came from the Permian Basin. And that wouldn't surprise me if that trend continues. So we're going to have pretty good employment growth and CapEx in the oil basin, in the oil region here, and that provides a good tailwind for Texas. About 8% of Texas GDP, but it's a pretty good tailwind. So with all those dynamics, you're going to see the headline unemployment rate in the United States continue to decline. It's about 4.1%. And the measure of unemployment I look at, though, more closely is called, in the lingo, U6, unemployed plus discouraged workers plus people work part-time for economic reasons. That's 8.1%, but that's the pre-recession low, was 8.1%. It's not easy to get discouraged workers back into the workforce. And so it tells me we're going to keep taking labor slack, slack out of the labor market. You're going to get unemployment rates over the next year probably below 4%. That'll present some challenges. I know inflation is very important to you all, and while inflation has been lagging our 2% target, I think the cyclical inflation pressures, no doubt, are building. And then my last comment, and then we'll go to more questions, is but there's a headwind for inflation that's not going away. In fact, it's accelerating, and that's technology-enabled disruption. Technology replacing people, consumers being able to use technology to much more easily shop. Those of you who own malls know what I'm talking about. People are shopping before they go to the mall, before they go to the car dealer. It's changing consumer dynamics. And the way businesses are dealing with this pressure is to further invest in technology that replaces people. And so these trends are limiting pricing power of businesses. I think they created some headwind for inflation, and we're just going to have to see how these cyclical pressures building and these structural forces of technology-enabled disruption, how those opposing forces are going to work themselves out. But I would not be surprised, given the strength of the job market, the cyclical pressures are building substantially and may well offset some of the structural headwinds, but we'll have to see.
Rob, that sounds really positive. But was reading on the front page of the Dallas Morning News earlier this morning, and they said, article, North Texas is really doing well, but we've got a lot to learn. Well, many people here have been through the 73, recession, the 79 recession, the 86 recession, the 08 recession. And so, what do you think it is that we have to learn?
So it's a great outlook for 18. Here are the things to watch out for. And I'll come back to something I just mentioned. The biggest headwind for economic growth is demographics. That's not just true in the United States, it's true in almost every advanced economy. Again, our population is aging, workforce growth is slowing. Why is that a big deal? Now, Texas is bucking that because we're drawing people, but the country as a whole is going to have to face this. Why is that a big deal? GDP growth is comprised of growth in the labor force and growth in productivity. If labor force growth is slowing, that's a headwind for GDP growth. You hope then you can make up for it with productivity growth. And I'll come back to that. So the number one issue that the country's dealing with, and Texas is a little bit, I wouldn't say we're oblivious to it, but we have the luxury, and we shouldn't take it for granted. This is a place that is a magnet for people. So then the issue is, what could make it so Texas isn't a magnet for people? So obviously, there's some controversial social issues. Lagging educational attainment could be a headwind. Lack of infrastructure, although we've done a pretty good job on it, but some cities in this state maybe need to do more. Highest number of uninsured in the United States. And so lack of water potentially is going to be an issue the next 20 years. So the good thing for this state is those things we need to learn pretty much under our control. Good. Because we've got people. But we've got to do something. I worry for the rest of the country. The issue is this lack of population growth. There's not a lot you can do about it to combat it. Now, historically in this country, one of the ways we've dealt with it in periods like this is it's a sense of immigration. And yeah, tough borders, tough screening, all that. But immigrants are a key source of labor force growth. And believe it or not, immigrants and their children have made up over half the growth in the workforce in the United States over the last 20 years, and it's going to be more than that in the next 20 years. So that's something for the country to learn. Last comment about the state, this gets back to education. So I mentioned technology-enabled disruption and its effect on business and pricing power. It has one other big effect, on the labor force. If you've got a college education, statistics show you've got a very low unemployment rate, and you're very likely to be a participant in the labor force. And even if your company's going through disruption, you've got the skills and the training to adapt to it. If, on the other hand, you've got a high school or less education in this country and in this state, your job is likely being restructured or eliminated, and I think this is accelerating. And unless you get retrained, you're likely to see your productivity and income decline over your career. And this gets back to for Texas and for the country, it means that we need, the more we improve educational levels, early childhood literacy, college readiness. Half the students in this state aren't graduating in 6 years, something close to that. And workforce development, i.e. middle skills training and retraining, that's going to be key to Texas as well as the United States if we're going to grow. And I would say Texas is doing a good job, but we're lagging. The country, in my judgment, is really lagging. And disruption, technology-enabled disruption, means middle skills training is a lot more complicated than it was 15 years ago. Dallas Community College is a good example of a place that's doing an excellent job in this. But this is one of the challenges for the state. We've got to ramp up and improve educational attainment. It's directly correlated with ability to adjust and productivity of our workers, and it's going to be key to GDP growth, not only in Texas, but the United States. So that's one that we all in this group can do something about, and if there's a quote-unquote learning for people here, it's that we've got to get involved. And a lot of business leaders, including me, all of us can do things to help promote these programs and partner with nonprofits to get at these issues.
Education is so critical, and I've had some experience in the charter school system.
Yeah.
And they say that you get the kid, and you have the kid till they're about 8 or 9 years old. You got them. They're going to move forward. They get the right program. They get the learning. It's ingrained with them. But then, from about 9, 10 years old to 13, 14, you got about a 50-50 chance. But then after that, if they didn't have those first 2 steps, they're gone. We have such a hard time with those people. They're just out.
Yeah. If a kid starts kindergarten behind, if they're not at grade level reading when they start kindergarten, to your point, the studies show they never catch up.
Yeah.
And the problem in this state is lagging in this area, which is helps explain why college readiness is poor, but it also means that the quality of our workforce maybe isn't what it should be. So I look globally. I look at countries in Asia. I look at what's going on in Germany, Europe. One of the things that strikes me, difference between the United States and those countries, we do a lot of things better, and I like our hand much better than theirs, except we are lagging those countries in terms of the skill levels of our workers, which is one of the reasons why our participation rate of our workforce is lower than many of those countries. It's just our workforce isn't as skilled. We can fix it, but this isn't a 1-year, 2-year project. This is a multi-decade project, and it's got to be done locally in hundreds of cities through the United States.
You moved here in 2015 to come at the Fed, and has this phenomenal development that you've seen in this city surprised you? Is there any other city or area that you've seen this take place in? And with us who've been through many cycles, we know that mainly the disruption comes from overbuilding. Well, we're not overbuilding. Things are the properties are being leased, and the banks are curtailing. They're using restraint. A lot of equity in deals. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes. So I used to watch this out of the corner of my eye before I took this job, but now I watch it literally pretty obsessively. And SMU does a good job, among others, but SMU produces a heat map of all 50 states. Mm-hmm. And if you, in your business, and for me in my job, the number one thing I track are population trends, migration trends, population growth, demographics, average age of the population, average age of the workforce. And when I look at it today, there may be 4 or 5 states that have the migration characteristics that Texas does. And I'm talking about the whole state, by the way, and Dallas for sure. And the tax reform, because the lack of, without getting into a sensitive subject, the lack of deductibility of state income taxes may further accelerate these migration trends. But Texas is on, we're playing a pretty damn good hand, and I've said many times, you may have heard me say before, I had to pick a hand in the United States I'd want to play. Texas and Dallas in particular would be right at the top of the list. This is a pretty good hand. The only thing living here, and I used to spend a lot of years in business in Northern California, and when you go to Menlo Park and you go to Silicon Valley, you're like you're on another country, you're on another planet. Yeah. And sometimes being there, you forget what the other issues are. Like when I lived in New York for many years, living in New York, you're not as aware of the issues in many other parts of the country. Living here, because we've got this tailwind, I don't think people here take it for granted, and I think this state does a great job welcoming new people and trying to attract new people. But we've got the most valuable thing you can have, which is population and inflows. The trick is, can we raise the education levels of our existing population and further take advantage of the great asset we have?
Yeah. Well, we're all in this capital intensive business, and we have a fair amount of risk, in our business. And
yep.
We like stability. So how's the Fed's policies affecting stability in this?
So, and I'll give you my own view on this. So this outlook I just talked about for 18, fair enough. That's a very strong outlook. We are either at full employment right now, or we're going to overshoot full employment. Okay. The history in the United States, and I've looked at all these episodes, the history in the U.S. of those episodes when we've overshot full employment, the history of happy landings or soft landings, not a very good one. History is when you overshoot full employment enough, you tend to have a hangover afterwards. And that and the Fed, if it doesn't act a little bit preemptively, is at risk of finding itself behind the curve and playing catch up. And the history of the Fed playing catch up is not a very happy one. And if we play catch up and it leads to a flat or inverted yield curve, that tends to be a pretty good forward indicator of recession. Here's the issue. So I mentioned the forecast for 2018, 2.5%. Our own forecast of the Dallas Fed, which the only thing you know about forecasts for sure, it'll be wrong, but it's our best guess right now. It's about 2.2% for 19, and then trending down to below 2%, high ones by 2020. Now you may be sitting there and say, how could that be possible? The issue for this trending down is, again, demographics. We've got this aging workforce growth. So you know workforce growth is not going to be strong. Oh, by the way, in 2017, we had a good GDP year. It's not that new jobs last year actually grew a little bit less than in 2016. What did grow substantially last year was hours worked. If you look beneath the hood, hours worked dramatically increased last year, and productivity to some extent improved. Hours worked can't indefinitely increase. So we've got a headwind on workforce growth. Then the issue is, can we improve productivity? I am confident that every business in the United States is going to improve its productivity, and it's dramatically more productive than 10 years ago. So why is productivity so sluggish then? We measure productivity workforce-wide, okay? We measure the workforce productivity, not company productivity. And what happens is, as workers get squeezed out, particularly again if they have a high school or less education, and they don't get retrained, they become less productive. So if we don't find ways to retrain workers more effectively and upgrade the skill level of our workforce, productivity is going to be sluggish. The combination of sluggish workforce growth and sluggish productivity means sluggish GDP growth. So one of the big challenges for us, if we don't take some steps, we're liable to see a bump here in 2018 and then trend back down to trend growth. And this was one of my concerns about the tax legislation, last comment. I was a big fan and proponent of the reform elements to the extent it would help U.S. companies be more competitive, attract investment here, create incentives for more investment, capacity expansion, hire more workers. That part's positive. The element of the bill that is a tax cut financed by increase in debt is a concern, because I already think the debt levels in this country are unsustainable at the government level, and this is likely to make it worse. And you hear the debt, and we're doing this at a time where we're already at or near full employment. It's very unusual in our history. You're going to have a hard time going back in history and doing a tax cut into full employment. And so the risk of overheating here is, and some instability and excesses, we've got to be very vigilant at the Fed to be watching for those things, which is why I've been an advocate, and I am an advocate. The base case that you've read about, and I submitted 3 rate increases for 2018, I believe that is still a good base case, and we're going to have to watch because I think we want to avoid a situation where we have such an overheating that we're playing catch up.
You know, in 86 and 80 and 08, you know, we realized that we needed to be more conservative in real estate.
Yeah.
And, you know, taking your point, it seemed like if we're full employment or reaching full employment, you know, we ought to, you know, go ahead and pay down the debt with what that full employment produces. And I agree with you there, you know, on that. So
debt held by the public of the U.S. government is 76% of GDP, but the present value of unfunded entitlements is now $49 trillion. Likely unsustainable. And the reason we're not screaming about it every day is interest rates are low. And the second reason is the way we account in this country, unlike business, is it doesn't find its way into the annual budget until we spend it. So for those of you who read the Congressional Budget Office report that goes out 10 years, you see deficits going like this as a percentage of GDP. Why? Some of that 49 trillion underfunding is going to start to get spent. That was before we passed this bill. And my concern is this bill may further add to the debt, and I think that's a headwind for out-year GDP growth, and so I'm concerned about it.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about, potential of an overheating, we wonder about that as well in real estate because, values are very high. And we've been there and we've seen values move on up. And so, the low interest rates have helped us tremendously, and we've seen cap rates move toward Europe. And my question is that a sustainable low cap rate? Europe's been there a long, long time. Is that just a function of the capital markets in each country?
Well, so I'll make some central banker-ish. In my previous life, I would have expounded very easily on valuations. I'm a little careful about that in this job. Yeah, sure. But I'll comment, as you can imagine, because it tends to create trouble. But I'm going to comment a little bit on this issue of rates. So on the one hand, we're at or near full employment. I've told you we're going to further overshoot full employment, I believe, into 18 and 19. That normally, in our history, would put pressure on wages, inflation, and might put some pressure on rates. Yet we don't see much inflation. I think a lot of that is because of technology-enabled disruption. The other thing, though, that's going on is I've told you that the out-year forecast. So why does the yield curve look like it? You guys must watch the yield curve relentlessly, and I certainly do. So why is the yield curve flattening? One of the reasons, yes, is there's a lot of global liquidity. The central banks help create a lot of global liquidity. And every time the market cap in the world goes up and people rebalance, that creates more liquidity. So we got lots of global liquidity. Okay, that's one reason. But I think a equally or even bigger reason why the curve is flattening is sluggish outlook for out-year growth. That forecast I mentioned where we got a bump and we're going to go like this, I think the bond market is very much on that. And so back to this point, given the demographic outlook, which is a real headwind for GDP growth, that's going to create a headwind on rates too, I would guess, in the out years. So I think the markets have starting to assume that rates are going to be lower for a lot longer because of these headwinds. We'll find out if they're right or wrong. And this significant amount of liquidity is probably lowering risk premiums. And so anytime that happens, as a central banker, you got to be sensitive to it, but you also got to be on your toes that you're going to have excessive risk-taking, debt buildup, and other excesses that are hard to unwind down the road. So I think it's worth being vigilant about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about was technology.
By the way, I come from an industry when I worked in the most typical thing about the industry I worked in for 23 years is the most typical outcome the year before a firm fails is a record year. Okay? So things are going like this right before there's trouble. And so I am sort of conditioned when things are good, I get nervous, and it probably pays to be a little bit paranoid, neurotic here.
Well, I've just changed my position. Things aren't quite okay. So, we're all here involved in brick and mortar. We're in real estate. We do steel and buildings, and there's a disruption with technology going on in the retail sector. So I'd like to give me some thoughts about technology and how the convergence is taking place and so forth.
All right, so there almost isn't an industry that I can think of right now that is not being disrupted by technology, including certain industries that don't think they're being disrupted. Higher education is a great example. I came from Harvard. I was there for 10 years, and I can tell you higher education is right now getting disrupted. Now, you don't see the evidence yet, but it's building. Online education quality is dramatically improving. All you need to see is a 5 or 10% reduction in enrollments at a lot of schools around the country to, dramatically change the economics of that business. So it's happening in every industry. In retail, for sure, it's accelerating. You know better, this audience knows better, but I talk to mall developers and real estate people literally every single month in my round of calls.
Sure.
And I've seen all the statistics. Unless you have a Tesla or an Apple in your mall, mall owners tell me your sales are probably down. And also, they give me the statistics on parking rates in the lot, traffic. But this is going on not just at those kind of, at car dealerships. Used to be the key job in a car dealer was the salesperson. And occasionally you would meet with the person who fixed your car. And the car dealer, the salesperson was probably the highest paid person in the car dealer. That was 10 years ago. Today, most car sales are being done increasingly online. The salesperson job has been commoditized. That person, you don't need as many salespeople. That person doesn't make as much. But that automotive technician is now the highest paid person in the car dealership, probably making $175,000 a year, and you can't find enough of them. So it's affecting every industry. It's certainly affecting bricks and mortar retail. And my guess is these changes are, a lot of people think they're plateauing. There's not, based on what I've seen, if anything, they're accelerating, and they're going to accelerate. And I think to the extent you see I mentioned greater business investment, I think those business investments are going to tend to be in more technology that will further accelerate it. Last comment, this is one of the reasons why you're seeing record levels of merger activity. It's not an accident. And I used to do mergers for a living. If you look at individual mergers and you look at why they're happening, you're going to see it's a need often to deal with disruption, declining margins, and need for more scale to be able to make the investment in a technology that you need to combat this. I think this trend is accelerating, so I think you're going to see a lot more consolidation even from here.
Well, we're seeing it in the mall business. We're seeing it in the department stores because, you were on the board. By the way, he was on the board of Bed Bath & Beyond, and so he understands it from the inside. And those companies are just getting eaten away because the junior category boxes have taken, not at the underbelly of the department stores, they've just taken every one of those departments, and they've beat them. More convenient, more product, more choices, and so forth. So.
And merchandising used to be the view merchandising would defeat this, but it's been defeated by technology.
Exactly. And we saw hirings very flat during Christmas this year. And even though...
And margins are...
Yeah. What I've seen is that the bankruptcies are down. The store closings are up.
Yeah. So this is the other thing to be careful of. Because there is so much liquidity and credit spreads are so tight, my advice in all my years as a banker was always the same to clients. Finance when you can, raise capital when you can, don't take it for granted. We've gone enough years in a row where not everybody can raise capital, but pretty broad range of companies that in previous eras wouldn't have been able to get capital or already would have failed are able to raise capital. The challenge will be X number of years from now, I don't know when it will be, we'll get back to a more normal capital markets where you'll differentiate more and those companies won't be able to raise capital. But this is why you're seeing in my judgment, this is why you're seeing fewer failures. Those companies in previous eras would have failed, but the capital is so available, it's keeping these companies alive.
We have developed a proprietary digital marketing program. And we brought it out on Mother's Day of this past year, and we perfected it. And it's the tool to compete with Amazon. With all the brick and mortar stores, the centers and the tenants, we can blast on a weekend very inexpensively, hit 40, 50,000 people through, them opening the app. They also go to the website of the stores, or they're sending impressions, and we pay. It's amazing, and it's the best bullet that I've seen in a long time come to help the non-mall projects. So, there's ways to, it keeps evolving,
Yeah.
And we're a part of that. Yes?
It's 8:40.
We're about what? It's 8:40?
8:40.
We're having too much fun.
All right.
We're having too much fun. On interest rates,
Yes.
you know, we're seeing an uptick, and I think that, you know, it's kind of counterbalance to interest rates, you know, long-term seem to be going up a little bit, and the Federal Open Market Committee's policy on short-term rates has been uptick, but our long-term rates, our interim rates are staying, you know, pretty steady.
Yeah, so I'd say on that one, let's see how the market unfolds this year.
Okay.
I think the one thing that this is sort of a dynamic discussion in that you've heard a lot more discussion about the risk, and including from me, the risks of an inverted yield curve, and you don't want to create an inverted yield curve. But right now, the Fed funds rate's 125 to 150. The 10-year Treasury, as of this morning, is with 258, 259. So we've got some operating room here for a while, and we'll have to see what the 10-year does. The only thing I will comment on, I'll be watching it carefully, but we'll have to see.
We think the new tax act was going to be good for retailing companies, and real estate. Any comments you can make on that?
I'd just stick with what I said before.
Okay.
You know, the other thing I watch as it relates to retail and the economy generally is trade, because I actually think the U.S., Texas, but the United States generally, and to some extent retail, has benefited from the ability to have good trade. So, you know, what's an example? 70% of the goods that we import in the United States from Mexico are intermediate goods. Not final goods, intermediate goods, which means they're part of integrated supply chains and logistical arrangements which allow companies to locate here, add jobs, and we believe grow U.S. GDP and make this hemisphere more competitive, which helps all businesses. And one of the things I would like to see us do more, which is I'm also watching carefully, I'd like us to see a segment. Just because you run a trade deficit with a country doesn't mean it's unfair, okay? And you also have to segment whether the trades deficit is an intermediate good deficit or a final goods deficit, as it is with China. And so I do worry about that. So I made my comments on the tax bill, but I also think trade today, sometimes globalization right now is being confused with technology-enabled disruption. 10, 15 years ago, if there was job losses in your industry, probably might have been due to globalization. Today, no. It's probably more likely due to technology-enabled disruption. And this country has made enormous changes, including with logistics, supply chain arrangements, where actually I think globalization today for this country is an opportunity. It's being discussed like it's a threat, but it's an opportunity. And we need to diagnose this accurately. We're going to make some poor policy decisions which will hurt business, hurt retailing, and make us grow more slowly. So that'd be one comment I'd add.
Well, we're going to close, and with one issue I think that, you know, you can make a comment on if you want to, is that, you know, when we see a cycle in the real estate industry, we realize that, you know, okay, we deal with the cycle, we're focused with it. But what we look at, or don't look at, is that, okay, it's 18 years or 20 years since we had the last one.
Right.
And so there's all this growth, all this new infrastructure, and every one of them is different. And so I think going back to that article in the newspaper this morning, I think we still have a lot to learn, and we should, you know, be a student of the business.
Yeah, and the comment I'd made, just to add to, I agree with that, is there's cyclical elements and there's structural drivers. There's a tendency when you turn on the television, most of the discussion, if you listen closely, is about cyclical elements. In my job, I look at those, but I'm much more interested as a former business person and in this job to the structural drivers. Aging demographics, technology-enabled disruption, high levels of debt to GDP at the government level, and the last one is the impact of globalization, which I commented on. And those drivers will be much more likely to drive the results. And for Texas, one other driver on the migration to the state. And so I think if I had to give one advice, and I try to follow this myself, watch the cyclical elements, but you should be making, especially long-term investment decisions based on the big structural drivers. And that's a classic challenge that you got to keep reminding yourself of.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, everybody.
I want to say for everybody, let's give him, Rob, a big hand.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Rob.
Great to talk to you.
Hey, great to talk to you. I'll walk off.
Thank you.
Why don't you give yourselves a hand for Rob and Herb? How do we, I'm not sure how I topped that. That was pretty good. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, again. I'm confident that that presentation and conversation was a benefit to all of us. It's great to know a leader of a major financial institution that's so conversant and personable and with great foresight, so we're glad they were here. Today, you will be the first, pardon me, to hear the results of our survey of the DFW retail market. Let me quickly tell you about our methodology. We work with a proprietary database built over decades. For this report, Weitzman professionals surveyed every single multi-tenant shopping center, 25,000 square feet and greater in DFW. That task involves driving thousands of miles in 42 separate submarkets. At year-end 2017, the retail inventory incorporated 1,417 shopping centers totaling 197.9 million square feet. Pardon me, 200 million square feet is just around the corner. We are the largest retail market in Texas and one of the largest in the U.S. If you have attended our forecast before, and many of you have, and we're glad you're here, it's clear that we offer a realistic assessment of what our market looks like and what our market will be. And if things don't look good, we say so. But this year, I'm happy to say we're looking good. We think the good results, on pace with last year's, are again due to balanced retail expansion and less overall development. And that's good enough for the second highest occupancy rate we've ever recorded in DFW, right at 92.5%. This positive highlight is a great way for us to start covering the various components of our survey. And as you will see, it runs counter to many of the negative reports over the past year about the state of retailing. But before we get really into the numbers, I'd like to frame the DFW retail market and make a few comments about our largest retail submarket, Plano. Plano is almost a real-time microcosm of where our overall market is and where it is going. The market's healthy, 90% occupancy, for a huge inventory of 15.6 million square feet. Plano itself also reflects the current DFW economy with its related job, population, residential, and commercial growth. And also, Plano clearly saw the sexiest new retail project just opened, Legacy West Urban Village. That project joins recent mixed-use projects like West Plano Village in Plano with Eatzi's and Kona Grill and Cinemark, and now their magnificent 100-foot landmark sign. These mixed-use landmarks check off all the boxes for successful retail today. They offer experiential retail and a true sense of place, a walkable environment, heavy on food, local concepts mixed with innovative existing retailers and established retailers, digitally focused for the omni-channel world, with strong SEO and analytics, and geared up for the rideshare Uber economy with drop-off and pickup lanes. You get the picture, lots of boxes checked. But Plano is also home to some real estate challenges, including the struggling mall Collin Creek. Believe it or not, Collin Creek was the coolest new project when it opened in 1981. Unfortunately, over time, retailing changed, and Collin Creek got weaker. It lost its Macy's anchor last year, but new mall ownership is working on a creative redevelopment plan for the property because you just can't keep a good location down. At other revitalized malls like Willow Bend, we're seeing innovative and successful blend of traditional retail with entertainment, a greater food focus, service, and experiential offerings. Now we're going to focus on the key elements of our report: occupancy, construction, and absorption. Then I'll conclude with the forecast of where we see the market for 2018. First, occupancy. As we noted, one of our 2017 occupancy strengths is the 92.5% number. That's the second highest ever, and it represents a lot of stability in our retail market. We did, however, see a slight uptick in vacancy last year in the Dallas market because we saw 4 legacy department stores go dark. Neiman Marcus closed its longtime Fort Worth location to move to a new high-end open-air project. Sears closed at Valley View, and Macy's not only closed at the Collin Creek store I referenced earlier, but it also closed at Redbird in Southwest Dallas. These foreclosures alone accounted for 3/4 square feet of mall vacancy. And in the Power Center, we saw bankruptcy of Gander Mountain create more 150,000 square feet of new vacancies. Now, these vacancies are being actively marketed now, and it bears repeating that the DFW market has a long and strong record of backfilling vacant spaces. That said, let's now take a more specific look at the major retail that we track. We'll start with malls. Despite the closures I mentioned earlier, this still remains one of our strongest categories. One reason is that the weakest malls like Redbird, Collin Creek, and Vista Ridge are being repurposed, redeveloped. And the strongest malls like North Park and Stonebriar benefit from creative management, marketing, and leasing programs to stay relevant. So how do malls look? At the year-end 2017, it's a healthy 93.6%. However, despite good overall mall activity, this represents a small drop from 93.8% at year-end 2016 due to those closings. Our next category is power centers. Occupancy in this category is a healthy 94.5%. However, vacancy increased 1% over 16 due to those vacancies I referenced. Still, these are some of our market's strongest projects with great locations, great traffic, and great co-tenancies. Ironically, this is the category that Amazon almost killed. Today, though, power centers continue to tweak their lineups with a mix of uses like entertainment, fitness, service, food, and even medical. As a result, this category remains very healthy today. Our next category is neighborhood centers. At the end of 2017, occupancy in this category was 88.8%, down from 89.4% a year earlier. Neighborhood centers, by definition, are the unanchored strips, typically between 25,000 feet and 100,000 square feet. Over the years, neighborhood has traditionally been our weakest performing category. While many of these shopping centers are still full, but no other category has so many older and outdated projects. Last year, we saw vacancy increase by 234,000 square feet to a total of 4.6 million square feet. But even with that increase, though it's still a big improvement over year-end 2010, when there was almost 7 million square feet vacant in this category. Factoring in DFW overall growth, we can credit our increased multifamily densification for a portion of this leasing and improvement since 2010. Mixed use, our next category. We survey mixed-use retail space of 25,000 square feet in projects with residential, office, hotel, and other complementary uses. The most high-profile new projects in 2017, the aforementioned Legacy West and the Shops at Clear Fork, are mixed use. Mixed-use retail is healthy at 94.3% occupancy, even though it fell from the year-end 2016 at a rate of 95.6%. This category is also our smallest that we track, with only 7.1 million square feet of retail space. However, and make note of this, mixed-use absorption topped 1 million square feet. And our last category is community centers, which are so vital to the overall health of our total DFW retail market. They are the largest and most important category. They typically are anchored by a grocer or a major discounter. Occupancy in this particular category is also helped by steady existing center leasing with new demand-driven construction. Today, community centers report 92.7% occupancy. That's up from 2016 rate of 92.4. And it represents incredible leasing activity that added net 1.35 million square feet of occupancy, a statistic of major import for sure. As you can see by the review of our categories, our retail market is stable across the board. And as to what cycle we're in, 2 years ago, we said that we were in a new cycle, a cycle of stability. And it continues with strong job, population, residential growth, low interest rates, and demand-driven retail construction. As a result, retail construction in 2007 reached its highest level in 9 years. Last year, we saw space totaling 4.2 million square feet in 27 new and/or expanded projects. That's the first time construction has reached the 4 million square foot level since 2008, when 4.6 million square feet came online. However, back then, as a contrast, DFW retail occupancy was on the decline, ending that year at 87%. So today, we're in a much better place. We break down our survey, by the way, coverage in terms of the Dallas area and the Fort Worth area. In terms of construction, Dallas area reported 2.9 million square feet of new space, and the Fort Worth area reported 1.4 million square feet. Community centers were the most active category, accounting for nearly 1.5 million square feet. New space in 2017 was dominated by centers that focus on the following: food, we're talking grocery and restaurants, experiential retail, mixed use, entertainment, and adventure treasure hunting shopping like the Tanger Outlet Mall program. Conservative construction actually benefits our existing shopping center leasing, and here's why. It's all about absorption. This is the way that we measure net leasing. Net leasing recorded another strong year in 2017. First, most of our newly built centers opened full or significantly leased. That means, and this is important, that new centers increased occupancy, not vacancy. And second, ongoing demand for these boxes continue to take a lot of vacancy off the market. We're seeing such large vacancies turn into experiential concepts like Treehouse at Walnut Hill and Central in Dallas, and the new open-air development of the old Saks site at Willow Bend in Plano. You can see the positive effect of these factors in our absorption number. During 2007, the market absorbed 3.4 million square feet. That ranks 2017 as one of our best years for leasing. And it explains why we can see anchor store closings, yet we still end up with near record overall occupancy. So factoring in our insight, our commentary, and our comprehensive data of the DFW market, let's now look at 2018 for a forecast. We know, as was referenced earlier, that retail is transitioning, just like actually it's been doing for decades. But this year, it's full of opportunity. This year, based on what's announced or underway, we expect to see construction come in around 3 million square feet. And importantly, these projects are phased in line with demand, and so pre-leasing commitments will have a big role in what actually comes out of the ground. And please note that this construction commentary I'm giving you is based in the non-mall category. So based on that level of construction and the steady demand that we currently see in the market, we expect absorption in 2018 to reach 2.8 million square feet. And finally, we expect in 2018 an uptick in occupancy to 93%. But remember, this is DFW. So if we see additional closures, we're optimistic that these spaces will soon find new tenancy in this ever-evolving and resilient retail sector. And also, the playing field is leveling, as Herb mentioned, with fewer bankruptcies that occurred in 2017 compared to 5 years ago. So in closing, and most importantly for our retail industry, we expect 2018 to be the year that major retailers completely implement omni-channel to their business. Our grocers are leading the way, thanks to these market makers as they create more of our non-mall centers. And I know many of our friends in the grocery industry are here, and we want to thank you for being here and continued success. Our grocers are committed to digital. They use personalization and promoted items to encourage purchase of other products throughout the store. They embrace data and technology to make merchandise closely match a trade area's marketplace. Our leading grocers are mastering the delivery and click and pick up process, using their stores to make the strategy work even more efficiently. This is exciting stuff, and we're happy to be involved in this. So, based on our analysis of data and trends, we can expect another year of stability in our retail market, and that's a great thing. For the complete story of our survey for Dallas, along with the Texas landscape of retail, please pick up one of our forecast event books at the end of the program. We thank you sincerely. We thank you for joining us. We value your relationships as friends and clients. And again, a special thanks to J.P. Morgan. Here's to a great 2018. Thank you very much. And we'll still have some coffee out if you want to hang around and visit. And again, we thank you so very, very much. Have a great year.